Hey guys, Jay here, and this is my F1 fantasy team for the Dutch Grand Prix. Let's get into it. So it wasn't a great weekend for me in Hungary. Unfortunately, two of my teams dropped in ranking. Team 3 did go up because they used Limitless, but it still wasn't as good as it could have been. So what happened? Well, I was missing one key ingredient, that being Fernando Alonso. So at the time, the reason I didn't go with Alonso, first reason being, you can see here by the post FP3 sims for Hungary, Alonso needed 8 points for a 0.2, 14 points for a 0.6 price rise. With Hungary being a low overtake track, the fact that Alonso missed FP1 because of his back, I just thought it was too risky, and so I played too safe. I was also out on the Saturday as well, but you know, it is what it is. So I ended up playing too safe. So with Team 1, you can see here, this is from the team analyzer page on F1 Fantasy Tools, and I got hit by Bearman. Bearman's DNF cost me a negative 18, and in terms of transfers, surprisingly, I actually gained 6 points because I brought in Lawson for Gasly, but as you can see, I brought in Stroll for Alonso, and so that cost me 4 points. So Team 1 is now outside the top 1%. Now, my goal this season for me personally is to finish in top 1%. Obviously, higher the better. So Team 1, unfortunately, is now out of the top 1%, and so I need to get them back in, which is the top 25k. So yeah, not a great result for me for Team 1. For Team 2, again, I really strongly considered keeping Alonso in the team just to have a different driver in the teams. But again, play too safe, got hit by Ben's DNF, and in terms of transfers, as you can see, this time it was Lawson for Alonso, which cost me 7 points. And again, a drop in ranking, still in the top 1%, but obviously I'd like to be higher. And then we come to Team 3. Team 3, I used Limitless, but it didn't go as well as it could. As you can see, I had Verstappen in the team instead of George Russell. In terms of points, 22 points plus. So I brought in Leclerc for Alonso, Verstappen for Hulkenberg, Hamilton for Bearman, and Ferrari for Kick. So 26 in total, sorry, so 22 for the drivers, 4 points for the constructor, 26 in total. But again, I didn't have George Russell. It would have been better if I had George Russell. Chip impact plus 26, and then you can see underneath the price changes where everyone gained except for Bearman, obviously because of his DNF. That being said, Team 3 is now in the top 1%. They went up just under 5,000 places, so hopefully we can keep that going and get them as high as possible. The other advantage I have with this team is I've still got my wild card. Now, all that said, because it was a bad weekend, because I didn't go with Alonso, I can't deny that I felt very stupid, and I was beating myself up over it for a couple of days. However, I've looked at the team analyzer for the number 1 ranked team in the global rankings, which is this team here. So they had McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri, Bortoleto, Hulkenberg, Stroll, and Lawson. So they didn't have Alonso either, actually. They actually lost 23 points through drivers, but they gained 4 points through constructor, so they got a negative 19. They changed their ×2 from Norris to Piastri. That cost them a negative 7 points. But they are ranked number 1. But the reason I bring them up is because if, like me, you didn't do so well in Hungary, and you're like, ah, crap, how do I recover from this? Well, this team, the team that's currently first in the global rankings, only has a team budget of 117.3 million. Okay, so I need to correct myself here, guys. It's actually team value plus the bank plus what they made at the Hungarian Grand Prix. So their team budget is actually 120 million, dead on. That being said, it's still not enough for a premium asset builds, which is the point I'm trying to allude to. That's not enough for premium assets. So if, as we've been discussing, or as the discussion's been over the last sort of month, moving forward, we can now afford the 4 times assets. Theoretically, that will give us more points, which means we would have an advantage because we have a higher budget. So, like I say, if like me you were kicking yourself, why didn't I go for Alonso? Don't panic. If you've got 125 million, my team 2 and 3 do. My team 1 I think is a little short. But if you've got 125 million, theoretically we have the advantage moving forward. However, I looked at the hindsight page on F1 Fantasy Tools, and funny enough, if you had gone with this team of McLaren, Aston Martin, Russell was your 2 times, Norris, Alonso, Bortoletto and Hulkenberg, you would have come away with 310 points and 2.3 budget gains. So according to the hindsight page, this was the best team to have had in Hungary. I don't think anyone was expecting Russell to be as a ×2. Aston Martin, people did consider running Aston Martin in Hungary, but if you'd asked me before Hungary, should I run this team, I would have said no, because you know Piastri should be your ×2. If not, then Norris, if you can afford him. Aston Martin, fine, but it's going to be low overtakes. You know, pre-Hungary, McLaren, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Bortoletto, fine. Aston Martin, Russell, Norris would be the questionable ones. I then had a look at the elite data. So I was actually surprised how low this was. So in the global 500, only 1.4% of teams run limitless. No team whatsoever run no negative. And in the Patreon 500, 5% run limitless and 0.2% run no negative. So I had a little play with my teams budget wise, and these are just some examples. Now on the downside, if I keep Ferrari, I can only bring in Antonelli, who technically isn't an A tier asset right now. That being said, he's a Mercedes driver, so we kind of still half and half class him as an A asset driver, sort of. Same with like Tsunoda. But if I was to keep Ferrari, this team would cost me my entire budget. So Piastri, Antonelli, Alonso, Lawson, Bortoletto, McLaren, Ferrari. Budget gains would mainly come from Alonso, possibly Antonelli, because I think he only needs 12 points for a price rise into the Dutch Grand Prix, which we'll get to in a bit. But Lawson is on the price floor, Bortoletto is on the price floor, so sure, they might gain budget, but then who do we bring in to, that's on the price floor? That being said, Mercedes did really well in Hungary, to a lot of people's surprise. And so I could go with this: Piastri, Russell, Colapinto, Lawson, Bortoletto, McLaren, Mercedes. Obviously, Colapinto, would be the weak link here. But if Mercedes keep on form, then Russell, Mercedes with Piastri, McLaren is not a bad option. And there's been a lot of talk about possibly going this route with the McLaren Mercedes build. Just not a lot left in the bank when it comes to the bottom, the other 3 drivers. Alternatively, I then brought in Leclerc. This was on my team 3. I brought in Leclerc and Mercedes, and I could go Leclerc, Sainz and Mercedes. Sainz is now an option for budget building going into the Dutch Grand Prix. And Sainz also has a lot of overtakes, which we're going to get to a bit later in the video. But that's an option. If not, then I could downgrade to a HAAS. There's Gasly. Obviously, that gives me a little bit of money. But my point here is, whether it be Antonelli and Ferrari, or more likely Russell, Mercedes, or even Leclerc, Mercedes, there's options. I've also got the option of Piastri, Leclerc, Lawson, Bortoletto, Colapinto, McLaren, Mercedes, which would do me 2.2 in the bank. But again, Colapinto would be a weak link. Let's look at the budget builder going into the Dutch Grand Prix. So we'll get the tier A's out the way because it's going to be your usual suspects more or less. Now, there are more options for budget building with tier A drivers. Piastri has been the go-to for all ×2, but Russell now only needs 5 points for a 0.1, 25 points for a 0.3. Leclerc needs 15 points for a 0.1, 36 points for a 0.3, or Norris needs 10 points for a 0.1, 38 points for 0.3. But otherwise, you're more or less probably going to be going for Piastri. So I wouldn't really change anything there. However, if you can afford a second A-tier driver, then going by this, Russell would be your best option for budget gain. But with points, obviously, watch free practice and see how we go, because let's face it, Norris and Piastri, the McLaren drivers, are, theoretically, they're in the best car, so likely to get you most points. When it comes to the Tier A constructors, again, if you ain't got McLaren, why don't you have McLaren? Otherwise, again, Mercedes is the best option for budget gains, -34 for 0.1, -11 for 0.3, with Ferrari needing a -27 for 0.1, 0 for 0.3. When it comes to points, as you can see, Ferrari scored 70 points in round 13. However, they only got 39 points in Hungary, whereas Mercedes now have 50 points in round 13 and 54 points in Hungary. So, if you balance it out, Mercedes are kind of now on par, if not maybe slightly better than Ferrari, because they're more likely to get that budget gain. More importantly, when it comes to budget gains, let's look at the B tiers. So for the drivers, Bortoleto is now your top pick. -18 for a 0.2, -14 for a 0.6. He got driver of the day in Hungary, so he got 24 points. But he is on the price floor, so even if he was to gain budget, you would have to find someone else who's on the price floor in order to, take that 0.6 or 0.2 into account. Lawson, again, on the price floor, but -6 for a 0.2, -2 for a 0.6. And then we've got Alonso, who said I should have kept, but didn't. He got 17 points in Hungary, so he now needs a -3 for a 0.2 or 3 for a 0.6. So Alonso is looking good for the Dutch Grand Prix. And now we have a change. Carlos Sainz has jumped up. He's currently valued at 5.9 and has 6 points in round 13 and 6 points in the Hungarian Grand Prix. He needs 4 points for a 0.2 and 10 points for a 0.6. Now, I just want to quickly look at Sainz in a bit more detail. So, with Sainz, he looks good for the Dutch Grand Prix. My only concern is he had a DNF in Austria and he came away with a -1 in the UK. So his consistency's not been great, but he has 21 points for the season. He's picked by 39% of the player base, so he is an option. Otherwise, you've got Stroll again. He needs 5 points for a 0.2, but he needs 13 for a 0.6. And Hulkenberg now at 9.6 in value, 14 points in Hungary, is now dropped. 5 points for a 0.2, 14 for a 0.6. There was a lot of overtakes last year in the Dutch Grand Prix, 43 I believe. So it's not out the realm of possibility. You got 14 in Hungary, which was a low overtaking track. But at 9.6, Hulkenberg now is meeting his threshold when it comes to his value. And then after that, you've got Albon. But for me, Albon's too expensive at 11.2. That being said, 5 points for a 0.2, 15 points for a 0.6. Ocon down are the assets I wouldn't consider now if you're looking at budget gains. But if you're looking at them as long-term options for points, then again, watch free practice and make your decision. The only other asset that stands out to me here is Antonelli, 15.9 in value as a B tier, but 12 points for a 0.2, 26 for a 0.6. I don't expect him to get 26 points, I don't think. I mean, maybe, but 12 points I can see him getting, so I wouldn't completely rule Antonelli out. In terms of the B tier constructors, Kick and Aston Martin are more or less guaranteed for price rises. -33, -25 for Kick, and -34 or -24 for Aston Martin. Points wise, I would say it's pretty even. Kick are coming with 24 points and 35 points. Aston Martin are coming in with 20 points and 45 points. VCarb and Williams are options. They need -15 or -5 for VCarb, and -9 or 5 points for Williams. So I'd keep an eye on them. But otherwise, HAAS and Alpine I wouldn't consider. So where does this leave me with my teams? So with team one, I've got 3 transfers, but I've already used my wild card. At the moment, I would be swaying towards Mercedes. Now, it leaves me with a problem because if I remove, say, Bearman, obviously that means I still can't afford Russell. So if I was to take away Stroll, who's 9.7 million, I can bring him in, but then I've got no money for another driver. So the only way I can do that is by taking a -10 for an extra transfer. And then it would be a case of going down the order and going for, say, Bortoletto, and then I could bring in, say Isaac Hadjar, for example. But that's going to cost me a -10, and I've already used 3 extra transfers this season, so that's already -30 points. So for me, I've got to wait and see if it's worth it. Otherwise, if I was to keep hold of Ferrari, then my decision is possibly easier. Again, if I'm looking at the theoretical 4A, which is Antonelli. All right, he's not an A driver. I get, he's not an A driver, but that's, just using the 4A philosophy, that leaves me with 2.4, which means Hulkenberg would have to go, which then leaves me with 12 million. And so I could actually go for someone like a Sainz, and then even still bring in like Hadjar, or I could bring in Bortoletto. Don't know how comfortable I feel with that though. So I think at the moment, if Mercedes look good, it would be Mercedes. I would drop Bearman, and I would go for. I could go for Sainz. Whoops. Sainz is an option if I was to keep Stroll and Hulkenberg, which I'm not completely against. But if I want to bring Russell in, then I would have to take a -10. So that's what it's going to come down to for me, is do I want to take a -10, and then who fills in that last gap between Gasly, Hadjar, and Colapinto? Well, it won't be Colapinto. It'll be out of Gasly, or Hadjar. At the moment, I'd be swaying towards Hadjar just for points, because that way I've got both V carbs. The team 2, it's basically the same story. So constructors, Mercedes, and then drivers. I think I've got more budget with this team, but again, if I get rid of Bearman, I would have to get rid of Stroll, bring in Russell, and then I'd have to get rid of Hulkenberg, and then I bring in Bortoletto, for example. That leaves me 8.1. So in this occasion, I could even bring in Alonso. So team 2, the -10 might be worth it. Again, I'd have to take an extra transfer. It'd be 4 transfers. But with team 2, it might be worth it. I don't mind this team at all. Now team 3, I've got my wild card, but I need to decide if I'm going to use it yet, because other opportunities could come up. So let's say, for argument's sake, right now I don't use the wild card. Kick would go, and so would Bearman. Norris would go. In would come Mercedes. So right, again, I'd have to take well, I've only got 2 transfers, so this would be a -20, unless I decided to go another round of budget building with B-tier drivers, so Stroll and Sainz, something like that maybe. But with 2 premium constructors, I could even, whoops, I could even keep Ferrari, do something like that, and get budget gains with these 3 before downgrading it at the Italian Grand Prix. Hang on, no, I've done 3 transfers, haven't I? I've done 3 transfers there. Let me do 2 transfers. 2 transfers. Bearman and Norris. Let me see. I would go. Let's go Stroll. And, oh, actually, I could even do something like this. Which I'm not fully against, but then it means keeping kick. Something to think about. So I'm not fully against that. But let's say for argument's sake I use the wild card. Then it would be Mercedes, I think, right now. Russell. And then I would have to get rid of Hulkenberg. So let's put Russell up there. And then go Bortoletto, 5.2. So it'd probably be Lawson, to be fair. Lawson or Hadjar. Just Lawson because of the budget gains. But Hadjar for the points. So yeah. Ferrari wise, I can't have Russell unless I get rid of Alonso. I could do this. Let's see, can I? No, I can't. I can't afford that. So it would have to be Antonelli. And then it would have to be, let's go Alonso, and then I could do Sainz. But I think I much prefer Mercedes at the moment, with Russell. And then probably Lawson, just for budget gains. I mean, all this comes down to free practice, because at the end of the day, Ferrari comes with the pit stop points, Mercedes doesn't. But again, if Mercedes look good, like they were in Hungary, then this could be a good chance to start on that 4A. I would say my team 3 is in the best position. So let's talk about the chips. Honestly, for me, I think the only chip I'd be considering for the Dutch Grand Prix is the wildcard. Because now, if you've got a budget of 125 million or more, if you've got your wildcard, you can now, start to plan your 4A premium team. That being said, if you can do that without using a wildcard, then do that. Keep hold of your wildcard if you can, because other opportunities will come later in the season. But otherwise, right now, I wouldn't consider anything else. There is going to be rain on the Friday at the moment, but that's at the moment, 2 weeks before the actual event. Autopilot and extra DRS, no, unless you've got the 4A assets already, your two premium driver, the 2A drivers, sorry. Final fix is what it is. We know how that works. That's a case of waiting for the right moment. And Limitless, I would imagine a lot of people now have used Limitless, but I wouldn't consider Limitless for the Dutch Grand Prix anyway. I don't think, because of the amount of overtakes, or maybe, I don't know. I think Limitless is kind of a non-conversation now moving forward. So yeah, wildcard would be the only thing I'd be considering. No negative, I wouldn't be worrying about. I'd keep hold of that for things like Baku, Sao Paulo, street tracks and wet weather, basically. Now, if you're here in the UK, Practice 1 and Practice 2 is on Friday the 29th of August. Practice 1 is at 11:30, Practice 2 is at 3 o'clock. Practice 3 on the Saturday is at 10:30, with qualifying, at 2 p.m. So remember to lock in your teams before 2 p.m. on Saturday, the 30th of August, before qualifying. The race on Sunday is at 2 o'clock. In terms of the weather, at the moment, I'm recording this on Monday, the 18th of August, so 2 weeks before the Grand Prix weekend. So do double check this. But at the moment, as it stands, on Friday, it's going to be wet during Practice 1 and 2. However, Practice 3 will be dry, so I would focus more on Practice 3 as things stand. And then the race is dry as things stand. Cloudy with sun, broken intervals. So for last year's top 10, I thought I'd do something different moving forward. So these are the F1 Fantasy statistics on F1 Fantasy Tools for last season. So this is the 2024 scores. Your top 10, Lando Norris got 56 points, followed by Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, Piastri, Perez, Russell, Gasly and Magnussen. When I looked this morning, there was 43 overtakes in total last year at the Dutch Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton got the most with 8. And then finally, guys, GridRival. Again, didn't have a good weekend. I dropped in rank. I lost budget, 2.3 million. I got 866 points. I had Hadjar, Norris, Piastri, Colapinto, Bearman, who obviously got DNF, and Ferrari. I haven't looked at GridRival since the weekend, so I can't remember who's out of contract. But yeah, it didn't go well for me. And that's it from me, guys, for this week. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. I'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss our plans for the Italian Grand Prix. Otherwise, good luck for the Dutch Grand Prix, and I'll speak to you soon. All the best.